Welcome to this Tech Talk by Microsoft EMEA. Today we are talking about Azure Stack HCI security. So there are many aspects of security in Azure Stack HCI, and you can ask your questions about Azure Stack HCI and security directly in the chat. So feel free to use the chat on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Twitch to send in your questions around this topic, your comments, your feedback. And I will use this chat also to send you some information about this topic, because regarding the Azure Stack HCI security, there's own security guide, and I will send you this via the chat on the platforms. I will walk with you a little bit through this security guide, because all the relevant aspects are in there. When we have a look at this Learn article, I think you already know about this, that the docs.microsoft.com was moved to learn.microsoft.com recently. So this is similar or same content, but what was previously the documentation, the docs, is now Learn, because Microsoft sees learning and documentation together. And as part of the Azure Stack HCI documentation, we have here the Azure Stack HCI security module. And the great thing about this Learn platform is that you can download everything as a PDF. If you want to go save, for example, some of this content for the Christmas days, to have some reading content, you can download the PDF, and it will generate a PDF document. Let's have a look at the number of pages of this Azure Stack HCI document here. Document is created. So now we can see it's nearly 1,000 pages, 938 pages about Azure Stack HCI. It's Azure Stack HCI basics, what is Azure Stack HCI, and so on. But it is also Azure Stack HCI security considerations. And there are many important topics in this Azure Stack HCI security considerations. First important thing is, this is not only about Azure Stack HCI, but also about Windows Server 2022 and Windows Server 2019. So as you know, Azure Stack HCI is its own operating system, but the technology Storage Spaces Direct that is used in Azure Stack HCI is also available in Windows Server 2022, Windows Server 2019 in the data center editions. It was introduced in Windows Server 2016 data center. And for sure, Storage Spaces Direct is more powerful in Azure Stack HCI, but it's also available in the Windows Server part. So I think we all know why security is important. And the first part is what Microsoft recommends here: to build a secure foundation. And this is very, very important, that the hardware, the foundation, is the key to success for a secure Azure Stack HCI system. And when we open the microsoft.com/HCI page, this is microsoft.com/HCI. Then we will be on this landing page here. We can register for a free trial if we want to test and install Azure Stack HCI, and we can find an Azure Stack HCI partner. We want to choose this second button here, find an Azure Stack HCI partner. And there are two choices here: browse the catalog or launch the sizer. The size is perfect if we have a detailed planning with some sample workloads. In the catalog, we will find all the certified systems for Azure Stack HCI. Most of the certified systems for Azure Stack HCI can also be used with Windows Server 2022 and or Windows Server 2019 in combination with Storage Spaces Direct. There you should ask your preferred hardware vendor. Not all hardware vendors also provide support for Windows Server, but most of them do so. So the systems in the list here, and you can see in the solution builder list, many well-known names. So the list on the right-hand side is the list how it's presented by Microsoft actually. So I didn't change anything in the ordering here, but I assume you will find your preferred hardware vendor here in the list. Important is to understand regarding the security, the difference between the integrated system and the validated node. Both systems have the same qualification regarding the hardware compatibility. So both systems, validated nodes and integrated systems, pass the or have to pass the private cloud simulator test. This means the specific Azure Stack HCI cluster has to be built by the OEM, and the private cloud simulator test will run about 5 days on this specific hardware configuration. The result, if it's successful, is a certified hardware, and usually this is a validated node. For sure, a validated node can add additional values. So there could be a system builder in the list that offers a validated node with extended security capabilities, but this is optional. Validated node means the test was passed successfully and the test is provided by Microsoft. An integrated system always must provide additional capabilities. And these capabilities are, for example, extended support, pre-installed Azure Stack HCI operating system, but the integrated systems also have the requirement to provide additional security capabilities. So in a validated node, the secured core capability is optional, but a validated node can be a secured core system. An integrated node must be a secured core system. What does secured core mean? Let's check this in a short live demo. I have an environment here where I have a Windows Admin Center installed. And the Windows Admin Center has a dedicated security tool. As you know, the Windows Admin Center is modular. The different management tools are available in the tools list. And since a few versions, we have a dedicated security module here. So this here, security in the tools list. When I click on security in the tools list, you can see the summary. This is the first section here. In the summary, I could schedule a new scan I could start a new scan for the Defender in the system. This is available for Azure Stack HCI and for Windows Server. I could schedule a new scan. I could refresh the view. I can see when the last quick scan occurred. I can configure the real-time protection. Then on the second tab here, I have the protection history. I can see if there were any malware discoveries on this specific machine. And we have a section secured core. When I click on secured core, I will see this machine here. This is a virtual machine. absolutely does not meet the secured core requirements. So, because what are the requirements for secured core servers? When I want to have a secured core configuration, I need 6 requirements. First, I need a trusted platform module, TPM module. TPM 2.0 is required for Windows 11. It is optional for Windows Server. It is optional for Azure Stack HCI. But if we want to have a secured core Windows Server or Azure Stack HCI configuration, we need a TPM module in our physical system. And this is the reason why an integrated system of Azure Stack HCI usually should have this trusted platform module integrated. For a validated node, it's optionally. The virtualization-based security would be supported on this machine. So this machine would be capable of providing the virtualization-based security, but it's actually not configured. I could enable the virtualization-based security. Virtualization-based security helps us to isolate workloads from each other with the virtualization technology, and this increases the security of the system dramatically. The secure boot. Secure boot is on even on this virtual machine here by default. Secure boot ensures that when we power on the server, the whole system start is protected and is secured to ensure that the system cannot be compromised before the OS is completely loaded. Because more than 80% of attacks actually in the market use the situation where the OS and the security components of the OS are not fully loaded. The system guard capability or functionality is not supported on this machine. This would help to protect our whole system after the system start. The boot DMA protection ensures that you will not be able to manipulate some content in the memory or pull some content from the memory in the boot process. And the hypervisor enforced code integrity, HVCI, is not configured but would be capable on this machine. If every checkbox here or every line is green, I have a system that fulfills the secured core server requirements. This would look like this here. Everything is green, and I can read the text, your device meets all requirements for secured core server. If I'm looking for a secured core server when I'm selecting new hardware, I can be pretty sure that all the lines will be green when the OS is configured. If not, I can use this checkbox here. I can select the setting, for example, the first one, and click on Enable, and Windows or Azure Stack HCI will configure these options for me. This is important to understand. This is important to know because the secured core server topic is relatively new. In the Windows client area, we have the secured core PC since Windows 10, so since a few years. And it should already be well known at the customer sides, but with Windows Server, it's relatively new. And what's new is that we have this tool here in the Windows Admin Center where you can have a view on your status. So again, to show you the navigation, you use the Windows Admin Center to connect to your specific machine, and then you click on Security, Secured Core, and you will see the secured core status. Here you can see the hypervisor enforced code integrity could be enabled by the administrator here by selecting the entry, click on Enable, and the configuration will be executed. So we have the Defender module integrated in the Windows operating system and in Azure Stack HCI. So when we select such a hardware here, an integrated system where we have the secured core capabilities, a validated node where they can be optional, then we have the situation that we will install the Azure Stack HCI operating system. And there we can afterwards use the security tool we used also to check the security status to see what the status is. And there we can use all the capabilities the security stack provides to us. And when I have a look at the Azure portal to my Azure Stack HCI cluster, I will do this here. I'm in the Azure portal. I will select Azure Stack HCI here. And I have one Azure Stack HCI cluster 103 here. We'll select this cluster. And I can see this cluster here has some nodes. I will take one of these nodes, click on one of these nodes to get the detailed information. And there we have a security settings area. I will select the security in the Azure portal. And here we can see, we have for this system, no security alerts. Microsoft Defender for Server is on. What is this? The Defender is the protection module in the operating system. This includes the Defender Firewall. This includes the Defender Antivirus. This includes the Defender Real-Time Protection. This is on our systems. When we connect the systems to Azure, and as you know, Azure Stack HCI is always connected to Azure. It's not permanently connected to Azure because it's enough to have a connectivity once every month. The recommendation is to have a connection on a daily basis, but the minimum requirement is to have a connection to Azure minimum every 30 days. If we have this connectivity to Azure, we can onboard the server to Microsoft Defender for Servers. There are 3 different plans, Plan 1, Plan 2, and Defender for Servers for business. This is for smaller companies. Depending on our plan, we have different additional capabilities for the Defender stack. But important is to understand the Defender stack is always there. So when we think, for example, on Windows Server, where the Azure connectivity is optional, then we also have the Defender stack there on the nodes. The advantage of the integration here is that I receive recommendations. So I don't have any security alerts. So everything is fine. My cluster is running. I don't have any security issues, but I have recommendations. Let's have a look at the recommendations. The machines should have a vulnerability assessment solution. Severity is medium, so it's recommended to look for this. Machines should be configured to periodically check for missing system updates. Recommendation is high. So this means in my environment here, I didn't configure a mechanism for providing automatic Windows updates. This can be done via the Azure portal. This can be done via the Azure Update Management. So this says, pay attention. Actually, this is done manually. This could be potential security risk if you miss to install important updates. Then next point, vulnerabilities in security configuration on your Windows machines should be remediated, powered by guest configuration policies is low. Okay, Log Analytics agent should be installed on Windows-based Azure Arc-enabled machines is high. So this is a new Azure Stack HCI cluster. The logging is not activated on this system actually. And medium Windows Defender exploit guard should be enabled on machines. So the Windows Defender exploit guard seems to be actually not configured on these machines. And these recommendations should be configured. 5 recommendations are there. No alerts. Security component is turned on. So this is my central dashboard where I receive all the information about security and security recommendations. For sure, we can also check the second host. Let's see if we have the same security recommendations. Also 5 recommendations. Similar configuration, no changes on this machine actually. No security alerts here. And for sure, we can use the Windows Admin Center, for example, to connect to this machine. So we could check, I'm not sure if the Windows Admin Center is here installed from the Azure portal. We can use it here, but it says I'm actually not part of the Windows Admin Center administrators group. Sorry, this is the view for the machine. I want to connect to the cluster itself. Let's see the Windows Admin Center for the cluster. This is what I wanted to show to you. And for sure, we can also try to open the local Windows Admin Center instance. I will open it in another window here. Okay, I have to retype. So, and I will connect to the Windows Admin Center machine where this cluster is managed. And for sure, we can also connect here. Let's connect in the Azure portal via the Windows Admin Center. We can already prepare this. Let's check this here. This looks better. And here in the Windows Admin Center locally, I will also show this to you. Here we have the local Windows Admin Center and the cluster 103. Here we can see the security tools. It's the local version of the Windows Admin Center. And here we can see from the cluster point of view, we have the secured core settings. Here I can see the security settings per server. And I can see, okay, this looks different. In the virtual machine area, many options were not supported. Here we have the situation that I only have to configure them. So I have a TPM module, I have virtualization-based security on. I can configure secured boot, system guard, hypervisor, enforced code integrity. And for the cluster, we have an additional area, the cluster security settings. So, because now You see the difference? We don't have only one server. We had the view on the single server already in the previous live demo and in the screenshot I provided to you. But now we have a cluster. It's a cluster of 2 nodes for sure. This can also be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 nodes, up to 16 nodes for Azure Stack HCI. And in the cluster, we have some additional security relevant topics. We go to the cluster security settings. Then we have the core traffic. It's the intra-cluster traffic on port 3343. Do we want to have clear text, signing, or encryption? This can be configured here. And the storage traffic is the traffic that goes through the storage bus layer. Here we can configure clear text, signing, or encryption. For sure, if we encrypt everything, we need additional resources because the encryption has to be provided, has to be rendered. But here we have a security settings dashboard that acts specifically for the cluster. When we go for the single node, for example, let's open a new tab here in the Windows Admin Center. Then we can see again the difference here. This is the server 133. This is one of the nodes. We already had a view on this machine on the admin portal. And here we can see also the security tool. Here we have the security or security settings, but here with the view on a dedicated server, summary, protection history, and the secured status for this specific machine here. Okay, this so far to the security settings. One important thing I want to provide to you when we have a short look at the firewall. Let's have a look at the node 133. In Azure Stack HCI, every node also has a firewall. It's the Windows firewall or the Azure Stack HCI firewall here. It's the Defender firewall. It's the firewall component. And when we look at the incoming rules, you can see a lot of incoming rules we have here configured. And these rules that are configured here in the list, they can be extended via individual rules you provide. So you should never disable the firewall completely. This is important, so never disable the firewall. Always ensure that you fix your potential connectivity issue in configuring the required or recommended firewall settings. Why do I explain this to you? Let's have a look at this Azure Stack HCI cluster. And this Azure Stack HCI cluster, let's go to the settings, this cluster 103. It says, okay, there's an update for this extension. Let's first update to ensure that everything is fine here. Cluster manager, I want to update this extension. So cluster manager file sharing, let's see. GPUs, Lenovo, I will update this later. Remote desktop also later. SDN also later. Okay, and this should be fine so far. Okay, let's go to the cluster 103. And I want to go to the settings. and we have the Azure benefits here. So, and the Azure benefits are not enabled actually. When we enable Azure benefits, we will have some configuration changes here. Let's see first the virtual switches. In the virtual switches, actually, I have one virtual switch, and this virtual switch is called VM extern. I'm going to the settings, and I want to activate the Azure benefits. Azure benefits means I will receive extended security updates for VMs running on Azure Stack HCI. I will be able to run the Windows Server Data Center Azure Edition and these exclusive capabilities on Azure Stack HCI. So we'll turn on these settings, and it says, okay, I will have to turn on these benefits for each virtual machine because I will not configure it automatically for all the machines that are actually there. So let's turn on the Azure benefits. Configuration takes a few minutes. And I'm showing it to you because there happened something in the network configuration here. And there will also be some changes here in the firewall settings, and this is important to understand. To react correctly if you run into trouble to fix this issue with Azure Stack HCI. So actually the Azure benefits are turning on. So turning on the Azure benefits does not extend security or things like this. This is an additional feature to use these Azure exclusive benefits on Azure Stack HCI. But the firewall can be used or can be reconfigured to ensure that afterwards everything is still usable, everything will still work or will continue to work. So let's wait till the Azure benefits are configured completely, till they are turned on completely. Here I can already read the success information. Azure benefits are turned on. Actually, I don't have a virtual machine where the Azure benefits are configured. So if I want to have this VM01 activated for the Azure benefits, it's an additional step to activate this VM for the Azure benefits. So let's have a look at the virtual switches, what happened here. With activating the Azure benefits, I receive a new virtual switch. The Azure Stack HCI host, IMDS, do not modify virtual switch. And this virtual switch is from type internal. Yeah, this is what we can read here. It's an internal switch. Let's do it a different way here. Now we can see it's internal. Yeah? So this means it's an isolated network that allows communication with the host and the virtual machines that are connected to this virtual switch. Actually, no virtual machine is connected to this virtual switch because I did not activate the Azure benefits for any virtual machine. If I would enable the Azure benefits for a selected virtual machine, then this virtual machine will be connected to this virtual switch here and will be now able to communicate with the host to ensure that the Azure benefits are enabled. So the virtual machine talks to the host and the host talks to the virtual machine to exchange a certificate that is placed on the host for this EMDS attestation service. Looks fine so far. But now the interesting thing is to have a look at the incoming firewall rules. We'll refresh this list. And in the incoming firewall rules, we have two new rules. They have not been present 5 minutes ago before I activated the Azure benefits here. And these two rules, they are enabled. You can see this here. And they block something. And if you check them in detail, they don't block something, they block nearly everything. So this means if you activate Azure benefits, let's see say this is something like a small bug actually. The firewall rules should not be configured like they are configured actually. This only happens if you enable the Azure benefits, but if you're using Azure Stack HCI, potentially you will activate the Azure benefits because this is one of the big benefits you have in Azure Stack HCI. And this results in these blocking rules, and this results in that your Azure Stack HCI update service will not run anymore. So the cluster-aware updating will not run anymore. You will not be able to connect with the failover cluster manager and so on. So you will see many issues. You will see issues when you have a stretched cluster with the volume replication and so on. And so the recommendation is to turn off these rules. It's no problem. You can select this rule here and you can disable this rule. And you can select the next rule. You can disable the rule. So there's no explanation from Microsoft why the rules are configured. There's an official statement from Microsoft that for now, the best idea is to disable these rules. My own explanation is that for sure, this additional interface that is created might be a potential additional interface where some malware could try to access a virtual machine. And this is the reason why it's a good idea to have a firewall active that ensures that not every traffic runs across these interfaces, but this should not block everything. And so again, important, I disabled some rules. I did not disable the firewall. And this is the important thing, and still my recommendation, never disable the whole firewall. But if you have some rules that block you from using your services you want to use, for sure you can validate these rules and maybe disable these rules, or you can activate additional rules to give you access. It's important, the blocking rule always succeeds. So if you block something, it's blocked. So a blocking is very restrictive. And what's important to know, for sure, this is on both servers or on every node in the cluster. This is not only on one node, so I will also go to the other node and disable this here. Here on the second node, they are also enabled. I will disable these rules here. And now everything will work in this cluster again, including cluster-aware updating and including the failover cluster manager. Let's check if this one was disabled already. Let's refresh the list. Yeah, disabled. So also important, the firewall is not a central object. So when you go to the cluster object in the Windows Admin Center and you go to security, Then you have your secured core settings, you have the cluster security settings, but there's no central firewall or something like this. This always has to configure it on the dedicated nodes to ensure that we have the relevant security settings there. Okay, let's go back to the Learn article or to the docs article. We talked about the security tool. We have heard about the firmware things. This is also an interesting thing when it comes to the integrated system. Windows updates and firmware updates are provided by 4 integrated systems. So in the integrated system selections, so in the systems that are provided as integrated system, you always will also receive the firmware updates for your hardware, so you don't need to download it manually from any portal. You have a central update repository where this information will be provided. Yeah, BitLocker for storage spaces. So the encryption of our drives is also available in the Windows Admin Center. We go to the Windows Admin Center and we go to this machine and here the volumes. In the Windows Admin Center, in the volumes, I'm going to the inventory and I will create a small volume for demoing. This volume should be, let's say, 100 gigabytes. More options, fixed or thin provisioning. I have the integrity checksum, and here I have the checkbox for encrypting the data. I will check this option. Let's create the volume. Successfully created volume 02. We'll need a refresh till it shows up in the list. So volume 02. And here I could also decide for encryption. I could decide to use BitLocker afterwards. And I can read here, BitLocker encryption is an optional feature that protects your data against physical theft or improperly decommissioned hardware. It does not affect how your files look or how you access them. You can turn it on or off at any time. So this is part of Azure Stack HCI and the Azure Stack HCI volumes, the BitLocker drive encryption. It's the BitLocker drive encryption you also know from your client OSs or from your client machines. And this can also be configured afterwards, the BitLocker drive encryption here for the volumes in Azure Stack HCI. We have seen the SMB encryption in the security tool in the Windows Admin Center. We talked about the Windows Defender antivirus and the integration in the Windows Admin Center. Then we have here a topic about identity protection, things like browser protection, CRAD SSP we can use. Then we have an own section about the Azure Security Center. We had a look at the Azure portal where I showed you the nodes and the security settings about the nodes. And this is more and more important that our on-premises world is also protected by the powerful cloud security capabilities, because when you imagine when you are part of this huge ecosystem Microsoft operates with Azure, regarding the security, you only can take advantages because Microsoft always will protect their own data centers, the systems in their own data centers, the workloads in their own data centers. And when you are using this cloud-based security, you also will receive this security advantages, recommendations. We have seen the recommendations. What could I optimize on my environment? This will be also provided for customers that have connected their machines to Azure. Yeah, and for hardening the environment, we have an Microsoft Security Compliance Toolkit, including Microsoft Security Baselines. This is a list of security configurations. I can open the security baselines here, and you can see there are baselines for Windows 10, there are baselines for Microsoft Edge, there are baselines for Windows Server, for Azure Stack HCI, and so on. And this security baselines is a set of configuration options, of configuration settings to provide an optimized configuration and optimized settings for Azure Stack HCI. When a short switch to the security baselines for Azure Stack HCI, we could access the settings reference, and this is a GitHub gallery with a huge list of settings, including the location and the configured value that are recommended for Azure Stack HCI. These are things like auto run behavior, disable Windows error reporting, disallow autoplay for non-volume drives, and so on. Turn off printing over HTTP, many security relevant settings. So you can read through them, you can decide on your own which of these settings are relevant for you or which settings are helpful for you. If you want to follow the full security baseline, you will configure all these 267 settings for your Azure Stack HCI environment. So the question is, why is this not configured by default? So let's start with one of the first settings here, for example, interactive log on, do not display last sign in. This is the default that I see which was the last logged in user. And this is an advantage for me if I'm always authenticating, for example, with a user administrator. I don't have to type in the username and the password and everything, only password, and I'm in the system. This is the advantage from me. The disadvantage is if I have an attacker, then maybe he could already use the username information and only look for the password. And so it's always a trade-off, easiness of handling and security on the other side. And so it's your decision, and the default settings also always follow the well-known defaults from Windows, and they also often provide some comfort. The security for sure can be optimized with these settings here. Okay, security baseline. Then, hardening the environment. There's one of the recommendations to also think about running an SDN infrastructure, because in the SDN infrastructure, we have several additional security capabilities. Important is for those of you that are familiar with shielded virtual VMs. Shielded virtual VMs is a technology that was provided in Windows Server and Hyper-V, and shielded virtual machines are not supported in Azure Stack HCI. Azure Stack HCI uses other mechanisms for securing the workload, the network traffic, the storage. The traditional shielded VMs are not supported in Azure Stack HCI. Okay, so my recommendation is to read through this security article, I have often seen situations in the field where customers implemented such security baselines with the default settings without evaluating them, without thinking about them. And then you can sometimes see customer scenarios where you run into trouble because you are now too restricted regarding your domain environment, regarding your file access strategy, or things like this. So you always should review these settings and the recommended values against your environment. Okay, if you have any questions regarding the security in Azure Stack HCI, feel free to send in your questions via the chat. Today is one of the last Tech Talks for this year. Hopefully you enjoyed the Tech Talks, so also your feedback is welcome if you attended this session and previous sessions. We have one additional Tech Talk tomorrow. It's also at 11:30 German time, so the same time we had today. Initially, this Tech Talk was planned for last week, Tuesday, but unfortunately, because of sick leave, I had to reschedule this Tech Talk for tomorrow. Tomorrow, this is a Tech Talk Q&A. So it's for your questions around the Microsoft ecosystem. So today, your questions are welcome regarding Azure Stack HCI and security. Tomorrow, your questions are welcome for everything from the Microsoft ecosystem. And this is the last chance for this year to join this Tech Talk and send in your questions about licensing, about Hyper-V, about Windows Server, about migration, about downgrade, about upgrade, about installation, Windows Admin Center, hybrid stuff, whatever you are interested in, feel free to bring your questions with you tomorrow to the Tech Talk Q&A. Tomorrow, 20th December, 11:30 German time. So the same time we started today with the Tech Talk. If there are no questions, I will prepare some content from the Microsoft technologies, but for sure, this is your hour for your questions. And now we have a few minutes left. So if you have any questions about security in Azure Stack HCI, feel free to send in your questions via the chat. I will stay online for a few minutes. And keep in mind, the beginning of a secure Azure Stack HCI foundation is selecting the right hardware. You should always choose a certified system, a validated node, or even better, an integrated system for Azure Stack HCI to be, for example, prepared to fulfill all the secured core requirements. So thank you for your time. Looking forward to have you here tomorrow for the Tech Talk Q&A. And now I'm staying here for a few more minutes for your questions. Enjoy the rest of the day and see you tomorrow. Bye.